Speedrunners drop games or categories of games all the time. Sometimes it's just temporary, sometimes they never go back to them. This can be due to burnout, loss of interest, or just wanting to accomplish something else. I've dropped runs and games for reasons like these, but there's one game in particular that I stopped running for an entirely different reason. My own health. Not long ago, I went on a kick of rediscovering games I played way back in the early to mid-90s, the kind that I just have faint memories of and somehow figure out what they are. This led me to dig through my old collection of PC games and unearth a space shooter called Fury 3. Bundled with Windows 95 as both a demo and a full game, the goal is to fly around different planets, dive into tunnels, blow things up, fight a bunch of robots and bosses, called Guardians here, and otherwise save the universe. It turns out the game is also very easy to run on modern platforms, as all I did was copy the files off the disk and the game ran, and ran smoothly. The only issue then was reassigning the keyboard inputs, since the game was really designed to work with a joystick, and thankfully the game allows for this. For the most part. More on that later. When I was younger, I struggled a lot with this game, but when I picked it back up, I was breezing through it. And that's when the speedrun itch hit me. My initial times were really slow, being well north of the 1 hour mark. It didn't take long, however, to realize there was a way to finish the game much, much faster. The game has 2 standard rates of fire for lasers and missiles when holding down the fire button. However, these are much slower than mashing shoot. Missiles fire at a rate of 2 per second normally, but mashing can easily lead to launching over 10 per second. That plus some route adjustments led to my best time dropping well under 1 hour. I was set to go below the 50-minute mark, but then I hurt my wrist. After allowing some time for it to heal, I got back to the run and posted a sub 50 time. My run was still kind of sloppy, so I tried going back to it over the course of a few days to post a faster time, but I hurt my wrist again. Part of the issue is that I was running the all objectives category, i.e., the one that involves the most shooting and therefore the most mashing. I should note that while some people can mash buttons in a game for hours and feel no ill effects, I am not one of them. And this wasn't my first time that I got injured playing a game that involved a lot of mashing. Years ago, when I just casually played a PS1 game called Incredible Crisis, I hurt my arm and my shoulder to the point that I struggled to turn my head to the left. Anyway, this presented a serious problem. If I couldn't run the game without injuring my wrist, I would have to give it up. Even so, I'm a very stubborn person at times, and I insisted on continuing to run Fury 3. Then, when I posted a new personal best that was over a minute faster than my old time... 1 minute faster? It could be faster than that. Ah! I hope that didn't come through on the mic. Oh, God. What somehow didn't come through over the mic was a loud pop from my wrist. I'd heard it again, though admittedly not as bad as before. Still, the writing was on the wall. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but I knew I would have to give up running Fury 3. However, I wanted to be able to show off the game to a wider audience, as it's a rather obscure but pretty fun title. I submitted the run to a few marathons, and if no one accepted it, I would do one last hurrah on my stream. To my surprise, one event did accept it, one that I was quite familiar with. Midwest Speedfest 2021. It was almost fitting that a marathon I'd been associated with for years would be the one to let me run a Windows 95 title, and do it live and in person for charity no less. As glad as I was to be able to show the game and the run to a wider audience, there was still one problem. I needed to come up with a way to perform the run without potentially hurting my wrist for a fourth time. Usually when I play Fury 3, I reassign the throttle and roll commands to WASD and use the arrow keys to direct the ship, hitting shift for turbo boosts and mashing the spacebar to fire. My plan was to remap the controls so that I could mash the spacebar with both of my thumbs, taking some pressure off the wrist of my usual mashing hand. This was more problematic than it should have been, because Fury 3 only allows for some keys to be remapped. Keys like period, C, V, and P can't be reassigned to flight controls as they're tied to other in-game functions. That sounds minor, but this wound up eliminating the two keyboard configurations I was most comfortable with. In the end, I wound up using K, M, N, and comma to maneuver the ship, something I never fully adjusted to. Keep in mind though, I didn't come up with this plan until about 10 days before the marathon, and I moved into a new home 5 days before the marathon. And in the process of moving, I injured my back. But I was still too stubborn to not do the run. I tried to work in Fury 3 practice when I wasn't working or unpacking boxes or sleeping or laying down because sitting or standing upright for too long was starting to hurt. Even then, I still wasn't able to play the game all that smoothly. And then, the day came where I spent 12 hours driving to the marathon, arriving at the hotel and getting my badge with less than an hour and a half before my run started. I had just enough time to go up to my hotel room and lay down for 15 minutes because, well, driving for 12 hours can hurt your back normally, but if your back is already hurt, it just becomes that much worse. That said, I did still make it to the stream room and ran the all objectives category of Fury 3 for what would be the final time. It wasn't the best time, but it was underestimate, which is all I really care about when doing marathon runs. Shortly after that, since I was the one who created the Fury 3 leaderboard initially, I began asking around for a new person to take over the leaderboard, and then I never looked back. I know that some games or categories of games have debated allowing ways to get around mashing playing too big of a role in the run. This story is not meant to be any sort of anecdotal evidence for one side or the other, but I'd be lying if I said experiencing it firsthand didn't affect my outlook on the matter. One thing I can fall back on is that Fury 3 is still a game I enjoy casually, so even if I'm not racing against a clock, I'm still having fun with it. And to me, that's more important than any speedrun time.